Welcome back to the cryptowrld channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Bitcoin is perfectly playing out the overbought signal in the short term, simply cooling off after the previous pump that we saw over the last 1 to 2 days. And this is happening just after we wiped out the exact level of liquidity here, which I'll talk about in just a moment, alongside the US stock market, which is also still bouncing around relatively sideways in this larger range right now, which means we're seeing something similar for Bitcoin, still basically chopping around in a range, which I'll talk about in just a moment, alongside Ethereum, which is now actually rejecting again from this exact level of resistance here, alongside Chainlink also rejecting and struggling from my exact area of resistance. So in just a moment, I'll be talking about my next price targets and predictions moving forward, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, just before taking a look at the Bitcoin and crypto charts today, taking a quick look at the US stock market today. This is the S&P 500 index on the 1 hour time frame, and over the last 1 day, we actually first of all saw a decent drop in the short term, and now once again we're seeing another slight little bounce. But overall, we're still just basically bouncing around in a sideways price range. As we can see, of course, the choppy sideways price action is made up of shorter term bullish moves and shorter term bearish moves, but overall, we're still in this larger range, bouncing between support and resistance, which we've been seeing for months now, since basically the beginning of this year. And so this means we're likely going to see something similar to this for a lot of the crypto market. As always, there's not a perfect one-to-one correlation, but usually the crypto market follows somewhat similar price action to what the US stock market is doing. So keep that in mind throughout the video. And if we're taking a look at the Bitcoin charts today on the weekly time frame, not a lot has changed over the last 1 day. Super trend indicator still sitting in the red, and of course we still have a massive bearish divergence, which is technically still active on the weekly Bitcoin price chart. So once again, not a lot changed over the last 1 day. And if we're taking a look at the 3-day Bitcoin price chart, as I've been saying every day for around 3 weeks or so now on the channel, we're still just bouncing around relatively sideways between this support and this resistance. Of course, this support still sitting at around 60,000, and this resistance starting at give or take 72,000. And so, like I've been saying many times over the last few weeks, we're potentially still in a similar situation right now compared to what we saw back here around late November entering into December 2025, where yes, for a few weeks, in fact for a little over a month, we were seeing just a slight little relief, a break from all of the bearish price action, mostly in the form of a sideways consolidation between support and resistance at that time, with just a slight little bullish relief playing out throughout, but overall still within the much larger multi-month bearish trend. That was just a shorter term relief during the larger trend. And of course, that was due to a few different factors. We're running into major support here. Also, we hit oversold here in the 3-day Bitcoin RSI, telling us that we went too far to the downside too quickly and we need some time to reset a little bit. And right now we're seeing the exact same thing. We hit oversold a couple of weeks ago, in fact around 3 weeks ago, give or take, right around here at 60,000, hit oversold obviously, and since then we've been playing out that oversold signal, mostly in the form of chopping around between 60,000 and 72,000 in this sideways price range, exactly as predicted. And so honestly, continue to expect similar price action to this, at least over the next few days or weeks. Potentially, once again, this last time right here lasted for a little over a month, so it could likely be another few weeks of this still playing out here between support and resistance on the 3-day time frame. But of course, if we're zooming further into the short term, that sideways price range, if you want to call it that, is made up of shorter term bullish moves and shorter term bearish moves, obviously. And right now we're simply cooling off after the previous short-term bullish move. And obviously this is exactly what I talked about in my last video. I said we are already playing out the bullish divergence here, but we're hitting overbought is what I warned about in my last video. We're hitting overbought in the 2-hour Bitcoin RSI. So like I said yesterday, get ready for a cool off coming very soon within the next 1 to 2 days is exactly what I said in my last video. And obviously since then, we have indeed started that short-term cool off, just helping to reset the RSI out of overbought, which is pretty much what we see every time we see some sort of overbought signal. It's the opposite of an oversold signal. Once again, oversold means we went too far to the downside too quickly, and we need a little bit of time in the short term just to have a slight little relief, a break from all of the bearish price action. Right now, it's the exact opposite. We need a break from all of the bullish price action to cool off a little bit and reset this RSI, which has now been happening over the last 1 day. And so obviously, now that all of that has played out very nicely here, what is my prediction moving forward? And well, right now, I expect this cool off to slow down a little bit, but not necessarily have a bounce all the way straight back up towards the upside. So basically, I expect most likely the price to start forming a little bit more choppy sideways price action again in the shorter term. Of course, still remaining in this larger range here, but ultimately looking relatively neutral in the shorter term now that we've basically lost a lot of that bullish momentum, but we're not necessarily gathering a huge amount of bearish momentum either. We're simply just cooling off, resetting the RSI. But now that the RSI is back towards more neutral levels, obviously this is relatively neutral for the price. And another reason as to why I'm not overly bullish or overly bearish right now, I expect most likely a bit of choppy sideways price action in the short term, is due to the fact that we don't really have a significant amount of liquidity either side of the price of Bitcoin, at least in the shorter term, that's relatively close to the price of Bitcoin. Because looking at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, we can see that over the last 1 week or so, we wiped out a lot of downside liquidity first of all, and then of course with that latest bullish move over the last couple of days, we wiped out a major level of liquidity that was building above the price. And so yes, we still have some liquidity at around 70,000 to 71,000 in that area right there, which is still worth paying attention to. So maybe eventually in a few days from now, we could eventually make our way back up towards that level, but at least over the next 24 hours, I expect the price to kind of just settle and stabilize a little bit after playing out that decent bullish move and then cooling off once again, wiping out liquidity on both sides. We're likely going to just stabilize, let the dust settle for the next 24 hours or so before we eventually decide that next move. And so overall, that is my prediction for the next 1 day. And of course, the midterm, the sideways price range still perfectly playing out, nothing changed here. And of course, the longer term trend, nothing changed here over the last 1 day. So those are my exact predictions. And in terms of support and resistance, these levels have not changed over the last 1 day either. So still a lot of support at 60,000, a lot of support at give or take 63,000 as well, and a lot of resistance at close to 72,000, but even just under 72,000, especially around 71 to 72,000, I'd expect strong resistance around there as well. And of course, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any crypto, you need to be set up ready to go on a crypto exchange. And if you use the first link below the video in the description and in the pinned comment, that first link below this video will take you to this page right here over on the 2bit crypto exchange, which by the way is a no KYC exchange and is an exchange that I personally use myself, of course. And if you simply make an account using that first link below the video, once again, it'll take you to this page right here where you can take advantage of up to 800,000 USD worth of prizes simply just by trading crypto using that first link below the video. So if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out and take advantage of this. Once again, first link below the video. And remember, 2bit is also a no KYC exchange. But with that being said, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin dominance chart on the daily time frame, and of course the shorter term move has been a little more bearish recently, but overall in terms of the larger trend we're in, we're still looking relatively neutral. We're not looking massively bullish or massively bearish right now, still kind of just bouncing around relatively sideways, which means a lot of the major altcoins out there on average will still likely perform very similar to whatever Bitcoin is doing. And if we're taking a look at Ethereum on the 3-day time frame, obviously the 3-day Ethereum price chart looks almost identical to the 3-day Bitcoin price chart. Once again, a lot of these altcoins playing out very similar price action to whatever Bitcoin is doing, which means it's extremely likely Ethereum in the coming days, or most likely the next couple of weeks moving forward, will remain in a bit of a range here, bouncing around relatively sideways, which has been my exact prediction for weeks now. And obviously over the last few weeks has been perfectly playing out here because we're playing out an oversold signal in the 3-day Ethereum RSI alongside the Bitcoin price also playing out an oversold signal in the 3-day Bitcoin RSI. But remember, an oversold signal by itself does not guarantee the bottom. It does not guarantee a huge bullish trend reversal. It just means you expect some sort of break from all of the bearish price action, which right now we're playing out in the form of choppy sideways price action, a sideways consolidation. And if we're taking a look at the daily time frame, we are indeed consolidating and bouncing between this support and this resistance, which are the same two levels I've been talking about for weeks now on the channel. First of all, this support is still sitting at just above 1.8k, around 1810 to 1820. And of course, over the last few days, we perfectly bounced from that exact level on the price chart. And just over the last 1 day, we pretty much saw an almost perfect rejection to the nearest dollar or so from my exact Fibonacci level of resistance here, sitting at around 2150. And so do not be fooled by the immediate short-term moves that we're seeing on smaller time frames, this bullish move, these bearish moves. Do not be fooled by those shorter term moves, because ultimately we're still bouncing around between that support and that resistance. The same two levels I've been talking about for a long time now on the channel, still perfectly playing out exactly as predicted. And of course, if we're taking a look at the 4-hour time frame, looking at the very short term moves, of course, over the last couple of days here, we perfectly played out this bullish divergence like I've been talking about here. But once again, like I mentioned in my last video, we hit overbought, which means we're running out of room towards the upside, and we now need some time to cool off very, very soon, which has now been happening over the last 1 day. But once again, expect very similar price action for Ethereum as to what Bitcoin is doing. So of course, expect something similar to my Bitcoin prediction over the next 1 day or so for Ethereum, which means most likely the price settling a little bit, not necessarily having a huge move in the next 12 to 24 hours, but just basically cooling off a little bit, not having a huge dump, not having a huge pump, just having the dust settle a little bit after we saw that decent volatility over the last couple of days. And so really, for the most part, it's extremely likely that at least over the next few days, possibly even another couple of weeks, will remain in this sideways price range between this support at 1.8k and this resistance at around 2150 to 2250, obviously still acting as major resistance here. But remember, that's still the short to mid-term situation, basically a consolidation during a multi-month bearish trend, which we've not yet fully confirmed the reversal out of the much larger bearish trend. And if we're taking a look at XRP on the weekly time frame, it's a similar story for XRP. The longer term multi-month trend technically still bearish. We've not yet confirmed the end of this larger bearish divergence here, but at least for now in the shorter term, we're still holding this crucial area of support here, still sitting in between $1.30 to $1.40. Obviously the same area I've been talking about for months now on the channel, actually, since the price was well above $2. I've been targeting this area as major support at $1.30 to $1.40. And if we're taking a look at the 3-day XRP price chart, we're also in the somewhat short to mid-term here, still trying to play out this oversold signal here in the 3-day XRP RSI. But remember, an oversold signal by itself does not guarantee that this is the bottom. It does not mean that this larger bearish trend is completely over. It just means in the somewhat short to mid-term, talking about a few weeks, maybe even a month, we're likely going to see some sort of relief, a bit of a break from all of the bearish price action, which obviously over the last 3 weeks or so has been perfectly playing out as predicted. And this will likely continue a little longer, potentially over the next couple of weeks or so, playing out either some choppy sideways price action or just a very, very slight little bullish relief, but don't expect anything too major based on this reason alone. And in terms of immediate short-term moves, talking about the next 24 hours or so, once again, just follow my Bitcoin and Ethereum analysis, etc., to figure out what is likely going to happen for XRP. So basically the price starting to stabilize a little bit just in the immediate short term is very, very likely here. And if we're taking a look at Solana on the 3-day time frame, of course, right now Solana is also still showing the same story here. We're still in a longer term multi-month bearish trend, but in the somewhat short to mid-term, talking about a few weeks, maybe even a month, that sort of time frame, we're still bouncing around in this same sideways price range between this support and this resistance. First of all, we still have a lot of support at around $75 to $80 and a lot of resistance in between around $95 to $105. And we also have some short-term resistance here at pretty much exactly $90, which I talked about in my last video before we actually started to play out this rejection from pretty much exactly $90 as a short-term level of resistance. But we're still trying to play out this oversold signal on the 3-day time frame, which means continued sideways consolidation within this range on the 3-day time frame, most likely over a period of weeks. But if we're talking about immediate short-term moves that last very quickly, play out over just a few hours, maybe a couple of days. Obviously, we're also playing out an overbought signal here in the immediate short term, which means we obviously already played out that previous bullish divergence very nicely here with a major bullish move. And like I warned about in my last video, we're reaching well into overbought, which means it's extremely likely that within the next couple of days, we'll see some sort of cool off to reset the RSI. And obviously, since I said that right here, that's now exactly playing out just in the short term. But remember, zooming out, looking at the larger sideways price range, at least right now, we're still bouncing around in that sideways price range, which once again, if we're zooming out even larger, is occurring within a much larger bearish trend. So understand the difference between the different time frames. The immediate short-term move is that we're cooling off. during a sideways price range in the somewhat midterm, longer term trend still bearish. But overall, it is quite likely that this cool off will begin slowing down. In other words, we'll start to see the price stabilize a little bit in the coming hours and over the next 1 day is a very likely scenario, ultimately following my Bitcoin prediction and the rest of the market basically. And if we're taking a look at Chainlink on the 3-day time frame, it's a very similar situation for Chainlink. The much larger multi-month bearish trend, technically still the case here. We've not yet fully confirmed any massive reversal out of the much larger bearish trend. But with that being said, in the somewhat short to midterm, talking about a few weeks, maybe a month, that sort of time frame, we're still potentially in a very similar situation right now to what we saw near the end of 2025 throughout basically end of November, all of December, entering into even early January. The price was basically just bouncing around in a bit of a sideways price range, as we can see here, during the much larger bearish trend. And so at least for now, that is still the case on the 3-day time frame, playing out this oversold signal, resetting a little bit here, having a slight little break from all of the bearish price action in terms of the larger trend here. And as for support and resistance, we still have a lot of support in between $7.90 to $8.50, and a lot of resistance in between around $9.50 to $10, which is pretty much exactly where the price just rejected from over the last 1 day. And if we're zooming further into the short term here, taking a look at just the 2-hour Chainlink price chart, talking about very, very short term moves in the price. Of course, we've been perfectly playing out the overbought signal here in the 2-hour Chainlink RSI over the last 1 day, which is what I warned about in my last video. Once again, I said we already perfectly played out this bullish divergence here, but we went too far to the upside too quickly. We hit well into overbought, which means expect very, very soon, within the next 1 or 2 days, a cool off to play out, which means most likely a slight little pullback of some sort to reset this RSI out of overbought, which once again has now played out, and we'll likely start to see the price begin to stabilize a little bit now that we've reset towards more neutral levels here in the 2-hour Chainlink RSI. And so overall, expect something like this, the price stabilizing a little bit, but ultimately remaining in this range here on the 3-day time frame between that support and that resistance that I just mentioned earlier. And so overall, that is my exact prediction in the short term, midterm, and long term for all of these crypto assets, and the exact levels to watch out for moving forward. And of course, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of any crypto, remember, check out the links below the video to those exchanges if you want to take advantage of massive bonuses that are only available using those links to certain exchanges. And if you want to actually know how you can trade these moves, no matter what direction the price is going, then make sure to watch these videos popping up right here on your screen, because the video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions, and the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.